After my divorce, I became homeless. My ex-husband laughed. No one will ever love a broke woman like you. I was digging through dumpsters when a stranger in a suit approached me. Excuse me, are you Melissa Thompson? When I nodded, he smiled. Your great-aunt in New York just died. She left you her yacht, her penthouse, and her $53 million estate. But there's one condition. What he said next changed everything. True story. Before I tell you what that condition was and how I went from eating garbage to planning my revenge, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever felt betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you most. The rain in Atlanta felt different when you were homeless. It was colder, heavier. It soaked through the thin jacket I'd found in a charity bin, chilling me to the bone. I was huddled in the alley behind Odyssey, one of the most expensive restaurants in Buckhead. 6 months ago, I was eating inside that restaurant, celebrating a promotion. Tonight, I was praying for their leftovers. My name is Melissa Thompson. I am 34 years old. I used to be a senior financial analyst. I used to have a beautiful home. I used to have a husband. Now I was just hungry. My stomach twisted in pain, a constant reminder that I hadn't eaten anything solid in 2 days. My eyes landed on a black trash bag left by the kitchen door. The smell of seafood was strong even in the rain. My hands, raw from the cold, fumbled with the knot. Inside, I found it. A half-eaten lobster roll, almost perfectly preserved on its toasted bun. It looked like heaven. Before I could even take a bite, bright headlights blinded me, pinning me against the slick brick wall. A black Mercedes G-Wagon, my old G-Wagon, idled at the mouth of the alley. The doors opened. My ex-husband, Mark Washington, stepped out. At 36, he looked immaculate in a tailored suit, shielded from the rain by a large umbrella. And on his arm, my sister, Tasha. Tasha, 32 and glowing with my stolen life, pulled out her phone. The flash went off in my face. "Oh my God, Mark, look!" she shrieked, her voice echoing in the narrow alley. Is that Melissa? Are you eating trash?" Her laughter was sharp and cruel, a sound I knew well. "Wait, I have to send this to Mom and Dad. They will be so proud of their independent daughter." I tried to hide my face, shame burning hotter than the hunger. "Tasha, please stop. Mark, just go." My voice was a hoarse whisper. Mark stepped forward, his expensive shoes clicking on the wet pavement. He looked at me with a disgust I had never seen, not even in our worst fights. "I told you what would happen, Melissa," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "I told you. You're nothing without me." He was right. He had taken everything. He had come to me 6 months ago, his face a mask of worry. He said his company, our company, was facing a lawsuit. He needed me, his brilliant financial analyst wife, to help him protect us. He had me draft the papers myself, moving all our joint assets into a blind trust under his name just to protect us from creditors. I was a professional. I should have seen it. But I loved him. And my own sister Tasha sat right beside me on our sofa holding my hand. "Trust your husband, sis," she'd cooed. "He knows what's best." I signed everything. The house, the savings, my retirement account. 3 days later, he filed for divorce. He served me with papers showing Tasha was pregnant with his child. They had planned it all. The assets were in his name. The woman he cheated with was my own sister, and I was thrown out with nothing but the clothes on my back. Now in the alley, Tasha was still filming. "Say hi to your fans, Melissa. Look at the camera. Tell everyone what failure looks like." Mark looked down at the lobster roll in my hand. He snatched it from my grasp. "Hey," I cried, reaching for it. It was the only food I'd seen all day. He threw it hard against the brick wall where it slid down into a filthy puddle. "Garbage eats garbage," he sneered. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a single $1 bill, crumpled it, and threw it in my face. The damp paper stuck to my cheek for a second before falling into my lap. "Buy yourself something nice," he spat. "Oh wait, you're not nice anymore." He and Tasha got back into the G-Wagon, still laughing. The tires spun, splashing dirty alley water all over me. I just sat there, the dollar bill floating in the puddle next to my ruined food. I was completely, utterly broken. I just sat there shaking in the cold, wet darkness. The dollar bill was a soggy piece of paper in my lap, a final stamp of my worthlessness. Mark and Tasha were gone. I was alone. I wondered idly if this was it. If I would just stop. Right here in this alley, smelling like garbage and defeat. Would anyone even notice I was gone? That's when the second set of headlights appeared. They didn't flood the alley like Mark's had. These were softer, stopping at the alley's entrance. A long black Lincoln sedan. For a moment I panicked again. Was it one of Mark's friends coming back to humiliate me further? The back door opened. A man stepped out, not with a laugh but with a quiet dignity. He was an older black man, maybe 60, wearing a perfectly tailored wool coat and holding a large black umbrella. He walked toward me, his steps measured and unhurried, as if he wasn't walking through a filthy, rain-soaked alley. He stopped a few feet away and opened the umbrella, holding it over me, shielding me from the downpour. I flinched, pulling my knees to my chest. "Please," I whispered, my voice raw. "I don't have any money. Just leave me alone." The man's expression was kind but serious. He wasn't looking at me like I was trash. He was looking at me like he was looking for me. "Excuse me," he said, his voice a deep, smooth baritone that felt out of place in this nightmare. "Are you Melissa Thompson?" My blood ran cold. "Who are you?" I scrambled back, hitting the brick wall. "Are you police? Are you with Mark?" "I didn't do anything, I swear." He held up a hand gently. "I am not with the police, and I am certainly not with Mr. Washington." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a thick, cream-colored business card, holding it out to me. "My name is Elias Thorne. I'm an attorney with Thorne and Associates in New York. I have been searching for you for 3 weeks, Ms. Thompson." I stared at the card. Thorne and Associates. The embossed gold letters swam in my blurred vision. "New York, I don't understand." "I am the executor of an estate," Mr. Thorne continued, his voice patient. "Your great-aunt Ms. Seraphina James passed away last month in New York City." The name hit me like a faint, distant bell. Seraphina James. I tried to place her. I had a vague memory from when I was very, very young. A tall, proud woman with sharp eyes who had a terrible argument with my parents. After that, I never saw her again. My mother told me she disowned the family, that she died years ago. Mr. Thorne allowed himself a small, sad smile. "She was very much alive, Ms. Thompson, and she never forgot about you. She has named you as the sole beneficiary of her entire estate." I just stared at him. This had to be a dream, a hallucination brought on by hunger and cold. Her estate. What estate? A few old photo albums. Mr. Thorne's smile didn't waver. He spoke with the calm precision of a man stating facts. Her penthouse on Fifth Avenue, her yacht, the Vindicator, and her portfolio of assets, cash and property valued at approximately $53 million, I laughed. It was a broken, ugly sound that came out as a sob. 53 million. What is this? Is this some sick joke? Did Mark send you? Did Tasha send you to mock me? I swiped at the tears angrily. "Get out of here! Leave me alone!" "Ms. Thompson, Melissa," Mr. Thorne said, his voice firm but kind, cutting through my hysteria. "I assure you this is not a joke. I have the will, the death certificate, and a court order naming me the executor. Your great-aunt has left you everything." I looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception. I saw only tired, patient sincerity. 53 million, I whispered the number, feeling alien in my mouth. Why me? She didn't even know me." "She knew of you," he said. "She knew what your parents were like. She knew what family she came from, and she wanted you to have a different future." He paused, and his expression grew serious again. "However," he said slowly, "there is a condition, a very specific, non-negotiable condition in her will." My heart, which had just started to beat with a wild, impossible hope, seized in my chest. A condition. What kind of condition? Mr. Thorne's gaze shifted from my face to the dark, empty street where the G-Wagon had sped away. To receive $1 of this inheritance, he said, his voice grave. You must use it to regain control of Washington Enterprises. I froze. The rain was still running down my face, but I couldn't feel the cold anymore. Washington Enterprises. The name was like acid in my throat. It wasn't just Mark's company. It was the entire solar system our family orbited. It was the source of his power, his arrogance, and the weapon he had used to destroy my entire life. But why? My voice was still a whisper broken by the rain. What does Aunt Serafina, what did she have to do with Mark, with his family? Mr. Thorne extended a hand, and this time I took it. His grip was firm and steady, and he helped me up from the wet pavement. I ignored the soggy dollar bill that fell from my lap. It's a long story, Ms. Thompson, he said, his voice deep and compassionate. One that is better told in a secure, warm place, and it is one that she left specifically for you to hear. He checked his watch, a classic, expensive timepiece. Our plane leaves in 2 hours. The jet is waiting at PDK Airport. He looked at me, his gaze unwavering. The choice is yours, Melissa. You can stay here and accept the life they have given you. He gestured to the filthy alley. Or you can come with me and find out why your aunt believed you were the only one who could take back what was stolen from your family. I looked at the puddle where my lobster roll had dissolved. I thought of Tasha's mocking laughter and Mark's cold, dead eyes. This wasn't a choice. It was an awakening. I'm coming, I said. My voice wasn't a whisper anymore. The next few hours passed in a surreal blur. Mr. Thorne wrapped me in a thick wool blanket he kept in the Lincoln, and we drove to a private airfield. He escorted me onto a sleek white jet that looked like something out of a movie. I must have fallen asleep the moment I sat down in the plush leather seat, because the next thing I knew, the sun was rising over the skyline of New York City. The penthouse on Fifth Avenue wasn't just luxurious. It was a fortress of taste and power overlooking Central Park. It smelled like old money and jasmine, a combination I had never known. Ms. James, Serafina, left instructions for your arrival, Mr. Thorne said gently as I stood stunned in the massive marble entryway. She wanted you to feel prepared. He showed me to a bedroom wing that was larger than my entire old apartment. I spent an hour in the steam shower letting the hot water wash away the alley, the rain, and the last 6 months of filth and humiliation. I watched the dirt spiral down the drain, feeling like I was shedding an old, dead skin. When I stepped out wrapped in a robe softer than anything I had ever touched, I saw the closet. It wasn't a closet, it was a room. And it was full. Not just full, but curated. There were racks of silk blouses, wool trousers, tailored blazers, and evening gowns, and they were all in my size, my exact size. How did she know? I whispered, touching the sleeve of a cashmere sweater. She had you watched Melissa, Mr. Thorne said quietly from the doorway. Not to be intrusive, to protect you. She knew what your mother and sister were like. She knew what Mark was. The implication hit me. My aunt had been my guardian angel watching from afar, while my own mother. I suddenly remembered being 16, crying in my bedroom. I had been invited to a school awards dinner, but I had nothing to wear. My mother, Janet, had sighed in annoyance. For goodness sake, Melissa, just wear Tasha's old prom dress. It's perfectly fine. But Mom, it's baby blue, and it doesn't fit me right. Then make it fit, she snapped. We don't have money to waste on dresses for every little thing. Tasha never complains. You should be more grateful. I had worn the ill-fitting dress, feeling like a pale, awkward imitation of my sister all night. Now I looked at the rack of clothes in front of me. These were not hand-me-downs. They were armor. I bypassed the soft sweaters. I bypassed the casual dresses. I went straight for a charcoal gray power suit. The trousers fit perfectly. The blazer settled on my shoulders like it was custom made. I found a salon-style vanity in the bathroom. I sat down and found a pair of heavy shears. I cut my hair myself. The matted, neglected locks fell away, leaving a sharp, practical bob that framed my face. When I looked in the mirror, the woman staring back wasn't the victim from the alley. Her eyes weren't haunted by hunger. They were cold. They were focused. This was the woman Serafina James had been waiting for. I walked back out into the main living room, where Mr. Thorne was waiting by the fireplace holding a cup of coffee. He looked up as I entered, and a slow, appreciative smile spread across his face. "Welcome back, Ms. Thompson," he said. I took the coffee from his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne." I took a sip, letting the warmth settle me. I felt the last of the alley's chill leave my bones. I turned to face the window, looking down at the city that was now my battlefield. "I'm ready," I said. "Mr. Thorne, tell me everything." I met Mr. Thorne at his office the next morning. It was a high-floor suite in a glass tower overlooking the vast expanse of Central Park. The room was quiet, professional, and radiated a power I had never known. I was wearing a simple black dress, one of many Serafina had left for me. I felt like an imposter, but my reflection in the window showed a woman I barely recognized. The hunger and fear had been replaced by a cold, sharp focus. "Your aunt was a meticulous woman," Mr. Thorne said, his voice cutting the silence. He gestured to his polished mahogany desk. "She left this for you. She said it would explain everything." He slid a heavy, dark mahogany box toward me. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid. Inside, resting on dark blue velvet, was a single thick envelope. It was sealed with dark red wax, pressed with a J for James. My name, Melissa Thompson, was written across the front in an elegant, powerful script. My hands were shaking not from weakness, but from adrenaline. I broke the seal and unfolded the heavy pages. The letter began, and as I read, I could almost hear a voice I hadn't heard since childhood, sharp, intelligent, and completely unapologetic. "My dearest Melissa, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. It also means my greatest fears have likely come true. It means my sister, your mother Janet, and your father David finally allowed you to be destroyed, just as they stood by and watched me be destroyed 40 years ago." I looked up at Thorne, my breath catching in my throat. What does she mean? What did they do? He simply nodded toward the letter. "Keep reading, Miss Thompson. The truth is in her words." I read on, and the carefully constructed world of my childhood shattered into 1,000 pieces. The letter was a confession, a history of a betrayal so deep it defined my entire existence. Serafina wrote that she and Jerome Washington Mark's grandfather had been partners in the 1970s. Washington Enterprises was their dream. She was the financial brain. He was the charismatic face. But as the company became successful, Jerome grew greedy. He wanted it all for himself. And to do that, he needed an accomplice. He found one in my father, David Thompson. At the time, my father was a young, ambitious accountant at the firm. He was desperately in love with Serafina's younger sister, my mother Janet. But Janet, as Serafina wrote, refused to marry a poor, spineless accountant. She wanted a life of luxury and status, and she told my father to prove he could provide it. So he did. Jerome Washington offered my father a deal. David would use his access to the books to help Jerome forge documents, create millions in fake corporate debts, and systematically bankrupt Serafina on paper. He would help push his own future sister-in-law out of the company she built, leaving her with absolutely nothing. In exchange, Jerome gave my father two things: a permanent high-paying seat on the board of directors and a secret substantial payout. I had to put the letter down. I felt sick. The upper-class lifestyle I grew up in, the sprawling house in Buckhead, Tasha's endless designer clothes, my parents' smug membership at the country club, it was all a lie. It was all funded by my father's 30 pieces of silver. He had sold out my aunt to marry my mother. I picked up the last page, my hands shaking with a cold, clear rage. I swore I would take it back. Serafina's voice continued in my head. I came to New York with the few dollars I had left, and I built this new fortune stone by stone for one singular purpose. This $53 million is not a gift, Melissa. It is ammunition. Here is my condition. You must expose the truth. You must take back what they stole from our bloodline. You must use this money to gain control of Washington Enterprises. You have 6 months. Her final words were burned into my memory. Trust no one in your family, Melissa. They are all poisoned by that man's legacy. Be the justice I never received. I flew back to Atlanta that same day. I didn't return to the alley. I checked into the penthouse suite at the Four Seasons, using the platinum card. Elias Thorne had given me a card funded by Serafina's estate. For 2 days, I sat in that suite ordering room service and staring at the skyline of the city that had chewed me up and spat me out. I wasn't just processing grief for an aunt I never knew. I was processing the rage of a life built on lies. My entire childhood, my mother's complaints about money, my father's lectures on loyalty, it was all a performance. On Sunday evening, I put on a simple, expensive-looking dark blue dress, also from Serafina's collection. I called an Uber Black and gave the driver an address I hadn't visited in 6 months. My parents' house. When I arrived, the driveway was full. Mark's G-Wagon was parked arrogantly near the front walk. They were all here. Sunday dinner. The weekly ritual of the happy, successful Thompson, Washington clan. I walked up the stone path and rang the doorbell. I could hear laughter and loud talking from inside. A moment later, the door opened. My mother Janet stood there, a wine glass in her hand. She froze, her smile fading as she took in my appearance. Her eyes traveled from my clean-styled hair down to my designer shoes. She didn't look happy to see me. She looked confused, almost angry. "Melissa," she finally stammered. What are you doing here? How did you—" Before she could finish, Tasha appeared behind her, holding Mark's arm, her face twisted into a familiar sneer. "Oh, look what the rain washed in," she drawled, her eyes raking over my outfit. "Where did you get the clothes, sis? Did you finally find a rich old man to take you in, or did you just steal them?" I ignored her. I looked past my mother and smiled politely. "Hello, Mom. Aren't you going to invite me in?" I walked past her into the foyer, my heels clicking on the marble floor. "Hello, everyone," I called out. "I'm home." The living room fell silent. Mark and my father David were standing by the fireplace, tumblers of whiskey in their hands. They turned and my father's jaw literally dropped. "Melissa," he said, his voice hard. "What is the meaning of this? Where did you get that outfit?" "That's a strange greeting, Dad," I said, walking further into the room. "But I'm not here for pleasantries. I'm here to ask you a question." "You're not welcome here," Tasha snapped, following me in. "Get out before I call the police." "Oh, I wouldn't do that if I were you, Tasha," I said calmly. "You should probably sit down. All of you." I turned back to my father, who was staring at me with a mixture of anger and suspicion. "I wanted to ask you about Aunt Serafina." The reaction was instantaneous. My father's face went white. My mother let out a small, strangled gasp and dropped her wineglass. It shattered on the floor, red wine splashing across the white rug. "Don't you dare say that name in this house," my mother hissed, her face contorted. "That woman is dead. She's been dead to this family for decades." "Actually, I said she just died last month, in New York, and she left me a message, Dad, a very detailed message, about you, about how you helped Jerome Washington destroy her, about how you framed her, faked the books, and stole her company." The room exploded. "You shut your mouth," my father roared, taking a step toward me. "She was a bitter, crazy woman. You dare come into my house and accuse me of—" "Accuse you of what, Dad?" I met his gaze. "The truth?" Mark finally spoke, his voice slick with amusement. He clearly thought this was just another one of my episodes. Melissa," he said, shaking his head. "You're really losing it. First you're eating trash in an alley, and now you're spinning conspiracy theories. Do you need money again? Is that it? Is this some new pathetic attempt to blackmail the family? I don't need your money, Mark, I said, looking at him. And I'm not blackmailing anyone. I'm making a statement. I paused, letting the silence stretch, savoring the confusion on their faces. You see, Aunt Serafina didn't just leave me a message. She left me $53 million, and I'm going to use every single penny of it to take back the company you all stole. The silence that followed was absolute. Tasha's smirk was gone. My mother looked like she couldn't breathe. And Mark's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. For a second, there was just dead silence. Then Tasha burst out laughing. It wasn't a small laugh. It was a loud, ugly barking sound that filled the entire room. 53 million, she shrieked, clutching her stomach. Oh, Melissa, you've really lost it. You're not just homeless, you're insane. Mark joined in his laugh, a deep, condescending chuckle. 53 million. That's a new one. Honey, he said, patting Tasha's arm. I think your sister needs to be committed. You don't even have $53. My mother Janet finally found her voice. Melissa, this is just sad. You need help. David called Dr. Evans. She needs to be evaluated. She's just trying to get money, my father David snapped. He was angry now, his embarrassment turning to rage. Making up these wild, insane stories. You think this is a story? I asked. My voice was quiet, but it cut through their laughter like a knife. I reached into the pocket of my blazer, the one Serafina had left for me. I pulled out a small, heavy card case. I opened it, took out a single business card, and placed it on the polished dining room table. Tasha stopped laughing. She leaned in to read it. Her voice was suddenly small, confused. Melissa Thompson, investor, James Thompson Fund. Mark snatched the card from the table. What is this? What fund? What's James? That would be Serafina's last name, I said. It's the private investment fund she established in New York, the one I now control. My father's face was still red. A piece of paper doesn't prove anything. Anyone can print a business card, Melissa. You're a fraud just like your crazy aunt. I'm not here to convince you, I said, my voice as cold as the alley they'd left me in. I'm here to deliver a warning, specifically to you, Mark. Mark laughed again, but the sound was forced. The business card had unsettled him. A warning from you. I took a step closer to him. He was taller than me, but for the first time in my life, he seemed small. I know you owe $15 million to a casino in Macau, I said. The blood drained from Mark's face. He stopped laughing. I know, I continued, my voice low and clear, that you are desperately trying to cover a $30 million deficit in Washington Enterprises Operating Fund before the quarterly shareholders meeting in 3 weeks. David, my father, who was also on the board, looked like he'd been punched. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. That information was known by only 3 people, him, Mark, and Ryan Sullivan, the CFO. And I know, I finished, that you are secretly and illegally trying to sell 20% of your own shares in the company to a private buyer to cover your tracks. Mark was no longer smug. He was pale. He was shaking. How do you know that Serafina had you watched for 5 years? I said. She knew every dirty secret, every debt, every desperate move. And now I know. I let the silence hang in the air. Let them absorb the fact that the homeless woman they'd mocked was holding a financial dagger to their throats. Don't worry, Mark, I said, allowing myself a small, cold smile. I think I know a potential investor who would be very interested in that 20% share. In fact, I'd say she's highly motivated. I then turned my gaze to my sister Tasha, who was staring at Mark with a new horrified expression. And Tasha, I said, my voice softening just a fraction. My dear loyal sister, you should really check your joint bank account, the one you think is full of your money. Tasha looked confused. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the $500,000 Mark wired out of it last Thursday, I said. To a private account in the Cayman Islands. I suppose he told you it was for business expenses. Tasha's face went white. She fumbled for her phone, her perfectly manicured fingers slipping on the screen. Mark, what is she talking about? What $500,000? Mark didn't answer. He was staring at me, his eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. He finally saw me. Not as a failure, not as a victim. He saw me as the person who was about to destroy him. I'll see you all soon, I said, walking toward the door. Especially you, Mark. I'll be at the shareholder meeting. I have a feeling we'll have a lot to discuss. I opened the front door and walked out, leaving chaos in my wake. Before the door even clicked shut, I heard Tasha's first scream. Mark, where is my money? Where is it, you bastard? I didn't look back. I just kept walking. The presidential suite at the Four Seasons was no longer a hotel room. It was a war room. I had been in Atlanta for 3 days, but I hadn't stepped outside since the confrontation at my parents' house. The suite paid for by Serafina's estate was my fortress. Elias Thorne sat across from me at the massive glass dining table, which was now covered in financial spreadsheets, corporate binders, and laptops. 2 forensic accountants flown in from New York sat silently at the end of the table, their faces illuminated by their screens. Your aunt was incredibly thorough, Mr. Thorne said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. He pushed a thick binder toward me. She had Washington Enterprises under active surveillance for the last 5 years. Mark Washington is exactly what she predicted: arrogant, sloppy, and dangerously careless. He tapped a printout. He's bleeding the company dry. Vanity projects in Dubai, 2 failed corporate jets, and according to our private investigator. He slid a second, slimmer report across the table. A significant and very expensive gambling habit. I didn't need the report. I knew how to read the story written in red ink on the balance sheet spread before me. I was a financial analyst before Mark took my job, my home, and my dignity. I knew exactly what I was looking at. He's hiding a $30 million hole, I said, my voice flat. And he's trying to plug it before the quarterly shareholders meeting. It's in 3 weeks. Thorne nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. Exactly. And that is his mistake. He's desperate. He's trying to privately sell 20% of his personal shares. He's asking $30 million, just enough to cover the deficit he himself created. We'll buy it, I said instantly. Agreed, Thorne replied. We've already established the Shell Corporation in Switzerland, Geneva Holdings. The transfer will be clean. Mark will never see it coming. He'll just be relieved to get the cash. One of the accountants, a sharp woman named Alani, finally spoke. That still leaves us with $23 million in liquid assets, Ms. Thompson, but it only gives us 20% of the company. It's not a controlling interest. I nodded. I had already done the math. I stood up and walked to the large whiteboard we had set up by the window. On it was the corporate structure of Washington Enterprises. The Washington family holds the majority stake, I said, tapping the board. 51% split between 3 people. Mark holds the largest portion, 31%. His uncle Robert Washington holds 5%, and his older sister Chloe Washington Sullivan holds 15%. Mark thinks he's safe, I continued, circling his name. His 31% plus his uncle's 5% gives him control of the board. Even after he sells us his 20%, he'll still have 11%. He's too arrogant to see the real threat. He thinks we're the solution to his problem. He's wrong. I moved my finger from Mark's name to his sister's. Chloe Washington Sullivan, 38 years old. Thorne pulled her file. Serafina noted her specifically. Highly intelligent, graduated top of her class from Wharton with an MBA. Yet her father Jerome passed her over completely. He gave the keys to the kingdom to Mark, who barely scraped through his undergraduate degree at a state school. She's been sidelined her entire life, I murmured, feeling a bitter pang of recognition. Forced to watch her incompetent brother run her father's legacy into the ground. She must hate him. But she's loyal to the family name, Thorne cautioned. She might not be willing to side with an outsider Serafina's heir against her own blood. She might not, I agreed. But her husband will. I tapped the name linked to hers on the chart. Ryan Sullivan, 39, Chief Financial Officer of Washington Enterprises, and a white man in a power structure that values family legacy above all else. I looked at the accountants. A $30 million deficit. You can't hide that without the CFO's help. Mark isn't smart enough to cook the books himself. Alani nodded. Ryan Sullivan's signature is on every fraudulent transfer. He's legally complicit. He's compromised. Exactly, I said. Mark is using him, forcing him to sign off, probably threatening his career and his family to protect his own gambling debts. I remembered the look in Mark's eyes when he'd thrown that dollar at me. He was a bully who ruled by fear. Ryan Sullivan is the weak link. He's the one who knows where all the bodies are buried because he's the one who had to bury them. I closed the financial binder. The path forward was suddenly crystal clear. Mark thinks he's solving his problem by selling those shares. He has no idea he's just sold us the key to his own prison. I turned to Elias Thorne. I don't want to meet Chloe yet. I want to meet Ryan, alone. Thorne raised an eyebrow. What's the play? The play is simple, I said, standing up and walking to the window, looking down at the city Mark thought he owned. Ryan is trapped. Mark is threatening his future by forcing him to commit fraud. I'm going to offer him a better one. I looked back at Thorne, the last trace of the woman in the alley gone from my eyes. Set up a meeting with Ryan Sullivan. A quiet place, somewhere he won't be seen. I'm going to offer him an escape he can't possibly refuse. The jazz bar was dark, the kind of place where secrets felt safe. The air was thick with low lamplight, and the mournful sound of a saxophone. I was sitting in a high-backed booth in the far corner, a glass of water I hadn't touched in front of me. I had been waiting for 20 minutes. Right on time, a man slipped through the heavy velvet curtain at the entrance. Ryan Sullivan. He looked exactly like his corporate headshot, but with the life drained out of him. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and he was pale, sweating slightly despite the cool air. He looked like a cornered animal. He scanned the room, his eyes darting nervously from table to table, before he finally saw me and hurried over, sliding into the booth. He didn't take off his coat. I can't stay long, he whispered, his hands visibly shaking as he clasped them on the table. This is insane. What do you want? If Mark finds out I met you, I leaned forward, my voice just loud enough for him to hear over the music. You should be far more worried about the FBI finding out what you've been doing. Ryan's face went from pale to ghostly white. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? I said. Let's stop wasting time, Ryan. You're a smart man. You're the CFO. You know that I was just following orders isn't a legal defense, especially not in federal court. I haven't done anything wrong, he insisted, but his voice cracked. I sighed and pushed a slim manila folder across the table. Then you won't mind explaining these? He opened it, his shaky fingers fumbling with the clasp. Inside on top was a printout of a wire transfer. A very large wire transfer. You don't have to talk, I said, my voice cold and steady. Just listen. That is the first of 5 transactions totaling $30 million moved from the Washington Enterprises operating fund to an unlisted shell account in the Cayman Islands. An account my investigators have confirmed that is directly linked to Mark Washington's private bookie in Macau. I tapped the bottom of the page. And that's your signature, Ryan. Your digital key, your approval, on all 5 transfers. He made a small, strangled sound. You are an accessory to felony corporate fraud. I stated not as an accusation, but as a simple fact. You have actively helped Mark Washington steal $30 million from his own company. And when he goes down, and trust me, he is going down, you will be the one standing right next to him in the courtroom. You have 2 small children, don't you, Ryan? A boy and a girl. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with pure terror. What will they think, I continued softly, when they have to visit their father in a federal prison? He finally broke. He slumped forward, burying his face in his hands. He made me, he whispered, his voice muffled. He threatened my job, my reputation. He said he'd ruin me. And now I'm here to save you, I said. He looked up confused. Save me? I don't want you, Ryan. You're small time. You're just the man who got caught. But I need something from you. Or rather, from your wife. Chloe. Your wife. Chloe Washington Sullivan owns 15% of the company's stock, I said. I also know she's a brilliant woman who her father and brother have treated like a secretary. I know she hates Mark for what he's doing to her father's legacy. I want you to convince her to side with me. Ryan shook his head, looking defeated. Why would she trust you? You're just trying to take the company for yourself. You're no different from Mark. That's where you're wrong, I said. I leaned in, and for the first time I let him see the fire behind my eyes. I don't want to run Washington Enterprises. I have my own money, more than I could ever spend. This isn't about profit. This is about justice. Justice. My great-aunt Serafina James co-founded that company, and my father, David Thompson, helped Mark's grandfather, Jerome, steal it from her. They destroyed her life and built their fortunes on her ruin. I pointed to the folder. I want to expose them all. My father, Mark, the entire lie. And to do that, I need to take control. He was listening now intently. Here is my offer, I said, laying out the terms. I am the Swiss investor buying Mark's 20%. You already know that. That plus your wife's 15% gives us 35% of the voting shares. It's enough to challenge the board. It's enough to win. And what does Chloe get? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. She gets to be CEO, I said. I will nominate her myself. She'll finally get to run the company she's always deserved to run. You will keep your job as CFO, and you will be granted full immunity in exchange for your testimony against Mark and my father. I sat back. You have one choice, Ryan. You can go down with Mark. Or you can help your wife take her rightful place and save your entire family. The shareholder meeting is in 3 weeks. You have until tomorrow to decide. Ryan Sullivan drove home feeling like a dead man walking. He hadn't just been threatened, he had been offered a lifeline. The drive to his own sprawling home in the Atlanta suburbs, a home paid for by Washington Enterprises, felt different tonight. He felt the weight of his complicity, the shame of what he had allowed Mark to do. He walked into the grand foyer where his wife Chloe Washington Sullivan was waiting. She was 38, a brilliant woman with an MBA from Wharton who spent her days managing charities because her own family had no place for her in the business. She understood better than anyone. You're late, she said, her voice tight. Mark called. He was asking if I'd spoken to you. He sounded strange, panicked. Ryan loosened his tie, his hands still shaking. Chloe, we need to talk. Somewhere private. They went into his study, a room filled with books on finance he hadn't had the courage to truly implement. He locked the door. What is it, Ryan? You're scaring me. He told her everything. He told her about Melissa Thompson, about the woman in the jazz bar, about the $53 million inheritance. And then he told her the rest. I've been covering for Mark, he confessed, the words tasting like ash. He's stolen $30 million from the company fund, gambling debts. He threatened to ruin me, to tell the board I was incompetent, to make sure I never worked in this town again. I was a coward, Chloe. I was terrified. Chloe's reaction wasn't fear. It was a cold, sharp rage that Ryan had only seen glimpses of before. He what? She hissed, her voice low and dangerous. 30 million, that idiot! He's not just running my father's company into the ground. He's setting it on fire. And you helped him. I didn't have a choice. Ryan pleaded, his composure breaking. He had me trapped. I was going to go to prison, Chloe. So you just let him, she shot back. You just stood by while my buffoon of a brother destroyed everything our father built. No, Ryan said, grabbing her arms. Listen to me. This woman, Melissa, She has a plan. She has all the evidence, Ryan. Every transfer, every signature. She has us dead to rights. Chloe's eyes narrowed. So she's blackmailing you? No, Ryan said, his voice dropping. That's the crazy part. She doesn't want the company, she wants justice for her great aunt, Serafina James. Chloe looked confused. Serafina? The aunt your in-laws. Oh my God. The story, the one father always said was a lie. It wasn't a lie, Ryan said. Melissa's father and your father conspired to steal the company from Serafina, and now Melissa has $53 million and she wants to expose them all. But she needs our help. She needs your help. He watched his wife's face as he delivered the final unbelievable piece of information. She has a plan to take control at the shareholder meeting, and she wants to nominate you to be CEO. Chloe stared at him speechless. She wants me to run the company. She said she doesn't want to run it, Ryan said, hope rising in his voice. She said she respects you. She knows you're the one who should have been in charge all along. She just wants to expose Mark and her father. This is our chance, Chloe. This is our way out. We can save the company. We can save ourselves. We can finally get it out of Mark's hands. Chloe was silent for a long time. She walked to the window, staring out at the manicured lawn that her brother's incompetence had almost cost them. She thought of every board meeting where she'd been told to just handle the charity fundraisers. She thought of every condescending remark from Mark every time her father had praised his son's killer instinct, while ignoring her detailed, intelligent strategies. She remembered her father Jerome on his deathbed, looking past her to Mark and saying, "You're the man. You'll take care of it." She had been sidelined her entire life. Now, a total stranger, a woman her family's legacy was built on destroying, was offering her the one thing she'd always wanted. She turned back to Ryan, and for the first time in years, she smiled. It was a cold, sharp, beautiful smile. "All right," she said. "Set up a meeting with Melissa Thompson. I want to meet this woman." She paused, her mind already working. "But Mark, he's planning that ridiculous charity gala for next week. He's doing it to introduce his new Swiss investors." Ryan nodded. "Yes, it's his big night to look like a savior." "He's invited the entire Thompson family, hasn't he?" Chloe asked. "To gloat." "Yes," Ryan confirmed. Chloe's smile widened. "Perfect. That gala won't be his victory lap. It will be his execution." I flew to Atlanta a week before the gala. I didn't return to the penthouse suite. I checked into a quiet, understated hotel under an assumed name. My nights were spent in the war room with Elias Thorne and the forensic accountants finalizing our strategy. My days were spent preparing for the final confrontation. The embossed invitation sat on my hotel desk, a mocking reminder of Mark's arrogance. He had invited me. He actually wanted me there, likely to see me in the crowd, defeated and poor while he celebrated his fake victory. He had no idea he was inviting his own executioner. But there was one loose end: my parents. I had to see them one more time. I had to know beyond a shadow of a doubt where they stood before I dropped the bomb. I needed to give them one last chance to choose the right side, to choose me. I drove to their house, the house built on Serafina's stolen legacy, on a quiet afternoon. I didn't knock. I used the key I still had, the one they had never bothered to ask for back, assuming I was too broken and defeated to ever return. I found them in the dining room. They were planning their outfits for the gala. My mother, Janet, was holding up a glittering sequined gown against herself, admiring her reflection in the mirror. "David, do you think this is too much?" she asked. "I want to look spectacular for Tasha and Mark. This is their night." "You look fine, Janet," my father David said, preoccupied with a newspaper. "Hello, Mom. Dad." They both jumped. Janet dropped the dress, her hand flying to her chest. "Melissa, you scared me half to death. What are you doing here? Why didn't you knock?" "I still have my key," I said. I walked toward them, placing my briefcase on their dining room table. I wasn't the woman from the alley. I was wearing a steel gray suit. My hair was sharp. My eyes were clear. You You shouldn't just barge in here, David stammered, his eyes narrowing as he took in my appearance. What do you want? I received my invitation to the gala, I said. It seems I'm back on the family list. How convenient. Mark and Tasha are forgiving, Janet said quickly, recovering herself and picking up the gown. They are willing to put the past behind them. You should be grateful, Melissa. It's time for this ugliness to end. The past, I repeated. That's exactly what I'm here to talk about. I opened the briefcase and took out a file. I didn't slide it. I dropped it on the table in front of my father. What is this? He asked, suspicious. That, I said, is a copy of the original partnership agreement for Washington Enterprises, signed by Jerome Washington and Serafina James. And underneath it, that is the forged accounting ledger you created, David, to push her out of her own company 40 years ago. My father's face went gray. My mother stumbled back, clutching her throat. Where did you get that? David whispered. Serafina kept everything, I said. I'm giving you both one last chance. Right now. I am going to the gala. I am going to expose Mark for the fraud he is. But I am offering you an exit. What? What exit? My mother breathed. Stand with me, I said, my voice low and urgent. Come to the gala as my guests. When I get on that stage, you get on that stage. You admit what you did, Dad. You admit you helped steal that company. You publicly apologize for what was done to Serafina. I looked them both in the eye. And if you do, I will not pursue criminal charges against you. I will not lump you in with Mark. You will lose your board seat. You will lose your reputation, but you will not go to jail. It is the only way out I am offering. My father stared at the documents, then at my mother. I could see the frantic calculations in his eyes. Melissa, he finally said, trying to regain his paternal authoritative tone. You don't understand. If I do that, we lose everything. Our reputation. Our position in the community. Tasha. My mother suddenly burst into tears. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of pure rage. How dare you? She shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. You are trying to destroy your own father. After everything we've done for you, we raised you, we fed you. With money he got for betraying your own sister. I yelled back, my control finally snapping. That money was ours, Janet screamed. David earned it. He made a smart business move. Serafina was weak. She was unstable. She would have lost the company anyway. My father nodded, his face hardening as he found his strength in her delusion. Your mother is right. It was business, Melissa. Tough decisions were made, decisions that gave you the very life you grew up in. You should be thanking me. I stared at them. The last flicker of hope I had for them, the small, naive part of me that thought they were just misguided, died in that moment. They weren't just complicit. They were proud of it. And Mark? I asked, my voice turning to ice. What about his business? Do you know he's stolen $30 million from the company? The air left the room. My father's smug look vanished. What? What did you say? He's a gambler, Dad. He's been bleeding the company dry. And you as a board member didn't even notice. Or, I paused, a new sickening thought rising in my throat. Did you? My father stammered. He said it was a cash flow issue, a temporary loan. He was handling it. You knew, I whispered, the realization hitting me with physical force. My God, you knew he was stealing and you were going to let him. As long as the money kept flowing, as long as Tasha was happy, as long as your position was secure. David looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Janet stepped forward, her face twisted. Mark and Tasha promised to take care of us when we retire, she said, her voice a desperate whine. They promised. What do you give us, Melissa? Nothing but shame and accusations. That was the final nail. They had made their choice. They had chosen the criminals who promised them comfort over the daughter who offered them truth. They had chosen the lie. I calmly put the documents back in my briefcase and snapped it shut. I understand completely, I said. My voice was clear, all emotion gone. You've made your decision. You chose them over me, just like you chose Mom over Aunt Serafina. I walked to the door. Melissa, wait! My father called out, a note of panic in his voice now. Don't do this. You'll destroy the family. This will ruin us. I turned at the door, giving them one last look. You destroyed this family 40 years ago when you made a deal with Jerome Washington. I'm just here to settle the bill. I left them standing there in the house built on betrayal, their faces a perfect picture of terror. I'll see you at the gala, I said, and closed the door behind me. The Washington Enterprises annual charity gala was the crown jewel of the Atlanta social season. The grand ballroom at the St. Regis was unrecognizable, draped in silk and dripping with crystal chandeliers. Hundreds of the city's wealthiest and most powerful figures mingled their tuxedos and designer gowns, a blur of expensive confidence. On the main stage, a massive banner declared the theme, Washington Enterprises Building Atlanta's Future. And at the center of it all, at the podium, stood my ex-husband, Mark Washington. His arm was wrapped possessively around my sister Tasha's waist. She was glittering in a gold dress that I knew cost more than my old annual salary, looking every bit the queen of her new kingdom. They looked so happy, so successful, so completely, utterly untouchable. In the front row, my parents David and Janet beamed. They were seated at the head table, the honored family. They looked so proud, so smug. They had made their choice weeks ago when I had offered them a way out. They had looked at my proof, heard my warning, and calculated that I was still the loser. They believed Mark would win. They believed I was bluffing. They had chosen the lie because it was more comfortable. Mark tapped the microphone. The room filled with the buzz of conversations and the clinking of champagne glasses fell instantly silent. Thank you all for coming. He began, his voice smooth and practiced, radiating a false humility that made me sick. It is no secret, he said with a charming little chuckle, that the market has been challenging this past year. A few polite laughs rippled through the room. But a challenge is just an opportunity. He squeezed Tasha's waist, and she looked up at him with a look of pure, rehearsed adoration. My mother Janet actually dabbed her eye with a napkin, overcome with emotion. Tonight, Mark continued, his voice rising with theatrical importance, I am thrilled to announce that the future of Washington Enterprises is not just secure, it is brighter than ever. The room buzzed with anticipation. This was the news everyone was waiting for. Tonight, Mark declared, I am proud to announce that we have just secured a massive new investment partner, a partner who sees our vision, a partner who is committing $100 million to our future. The room exploded in applause. People jumped to their feet, cheering and raising their glasses. Mark was a hero. He had saved the company. He was lying, of course. He was lying about the amount. He was lying about the source. He was performing the greatest act of his life, and they were all eating it up. He raised his hands to quiet them, the picture of a humble leader. This incredible investment from our new partners in Switzerland, he said, lingering on the word Switzerland, will allow us to expand, to innovate, and to continue our legacy as Atlanta's leading corporation. He looked directly at my parents. And I want to personally thank my family, especially my father-in-law, David Thompson, for his unwavering support during this transition. My father practically glowed with pride. He stood and gave a small bow to the room. This was their moment of total victory. Mark raised his glass high. And now a toast to the future of... Thud, thud. The heavy, ornate doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. They slammed against the walls with a sound that echoed through the sudden silence. Every head turned. The applause died instantly. I stood in the doorway. I wasn't the woman in the alley. I wasn't the rejected daughter. I was wearing a floor-length emerald green silk gown, simple, severe, and costing more than my father's car. My hair was pulled back, my eyes were clear. I wasn't hiding in the shadows. I was the spotlight. Beside me stood Elias Thorne, his face set in stone, and behind us two more figures, Chloe Washington Sullivan and her husband Ryan. I saw Mark's face. The blood drained from it. The smug, triumphant smile vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. Tasha grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with a terror she couldn't hide. Mark turned to the head of security standing near the stage. "What is she doing here?" he hissed, his voice accidentally caught by the hot microphone, broadcasting his panic to the entire room. "Get her out! Get her out now!" The security guard, a large man in a black suit, looked confused, but started moving toward me down the long center aisle. "That won't be necessary," a voice boomed, calm and full of authority. Elias Thorne walked past me. He didn't hurry. He walked with a purpose that parted the stunned crowd. He walked right up the steps and onto the stage. Before Mark could react, before he could even comprehend what was happening, Thorne took the microphone directly from his hand. Mark stared at him, speechless. Who the hell are you?" he stammered. Thorne looked out at the silent, confused sea of faces. "Good evening, everyone. My sincere apologies for the interruption." He then turned his gaze on Mark, and his smile was as cold as ice. "There's no need to call security, Mr. Washington. We were invited." I didn't invite you," Mark shouted, his composure completely gone. "Oh, but you did," Thorne said, his voice resonating with power. "You've been begging us to come. You see, Mr. Washington, we are your Swiss partners." The air was sucked out of the room. I saw my father David shoot up from his chair, knocking his water glass over with a crash. My mother Janet just stared, her mouth open, her face a mask of horror. Tasha looked like she was going to be sick. I began to walk. My heels clicked loud and sharp on the polished ballroom floor. I walked down the center aisle past the shocked faces of Atlanta's elite. I didn't stop until I reached the stage. I walked up the steps and stood right next to my ex-husband, the man who had left me to die in an alley. I calmly took the microphone from Elias Thorne. I looked directly at Mark. His entire body was shaking. "Hello, Mark," I said. My voice was amplified, filling every corner of the vast, silent room. "Thank you for inviting me." I stood there holding the microphone, my hands steady. The entire room was silent, every eye locked on me, Mark, and Mr. Thorne. I could feel the collective confusion, the hundreds of wealthy guests trying to understand how the woman Mark had just tried to have thrown out was now holding the microphone as the Swiss investor. I looked at Mark. He was breathing heavily, his face a mottled shade of red and white. He was trapped. "Mark, you're right," I said, my voice echoing calm and clear through the ballroom's speakers. "The company did just secure a new investment, but you lied about the number." The crowd murmured. I saw reporters in the back scribbling furiously. "It wasn't $100 million, I continued. "It was $30 million, just enough to cover your gambling debts and the hole you burned in the company accounts. And the investment didn't come from Switzerland." I paused, letting the tension build until it was almost unbearable. "It came from me." The room erupted in gasps and confused whispers. "What is she talking about?" someone yelled. Mark lunged for the microphone, his eyes wild. "She's insane," he shouted, trying to grab it from my hand. I held it firmly. "She's crazy. This woman is homeless. I saw her eating garbage in an alley 3 weeks ago." Security. "Yes, you did," I said, my voice cutting through his panic. He froze. "You did see me, you and my sister Tasha." I turned my gaze to the front row, locking eyes with my sister. She looked like she had seen a ghost. "Mark is right about one thing," I said to the crowd. "I was homeless. I was destitute. Because after my husband, Mark Washington, convinced me to sign over all my assets, he left me for my sister and threw me out of my own home with nothing." More gasps. This was better than any high society scandal they had ever witnessed. But you're wrong about the rest, Mark, I said, turning back to him. I'm not insane, and I'm not homeless anymore. I am Melissa Thompson, and I am the sole heir of Serafina James. The name Serafina James meant nothing to most of the room, but I saw my father David clutch his chest. He knew exactly who she was. For those of you who don't know, I said, my voice gaining strength, Serafina James was the co-founder of Washington Enterprises, the brilliant woman who built this company from scratch only to have it stolen from her by Jerome Washington, and my father David Thompson. All eyes snapped to my father, who looked like he was about to faint. And I am here, I said, to take back what is mine. Lies! Tasha suddenly shrieked, jumping to her feet. She's lying! She's a vindictive crazy! Are you sure about that, Tasha? I interrupted. I looked at her, my sister, who had filmed my lowest moment for her own amusement. You were there after all. You helped Mark humiliate me. You filmed it, remember? You said you wanted to send it to our parents to show them how proud they'd be. Tasha's face went completely white. She knew. You're right, Mark, I said, turning back to him. I was eating garbage, but what you and Tasha forgot is that in 2025, everyone has a camera. And sometimes, the person being filmed isn't the only one being recorded. I looked up at the tech booth at the back of the ballroom where Ryan Sullivan was now sitting. I gave a small nod. And suddenly, the massive screen behind the stage, the one that had moments ago displayed "Building Atlanta's Future," flickered to life. It wasn't my video. It was Tasha's. The entire ballroom was suddenly transported to that dark, rainy alley. The audio was crystal clear. My own broken, whimpering voice. And then Tasha's mocking shriek. Oh my God, Mark, look. Are you eating trash? Wait, I have to send this to Mom and Dad. They will be so proud. The camera panned to Mark, sneering as he snatched the food from my hand and threw it into the puddle. I told you, his voice boomed through the speakers. You're nothing without me. A failure. I took everything, the house, the money, and your sister. The screen showed him throwing the crumpled dollar bill at my face. Garbage eats garbage. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. No one moved. No one breathed. Then Tasha let out a sound. It wasn't a word. It was a high-pitched animal wail of pure, abject humiliation. She stared at the screen, then at the hundreds of horrified faces staring back at her. She screamed, "No!" And then her eyes rolled back in her head and she collapsed in a heap of gold sequins on the floor. My mother shrieked and ran to her. The ballroom exploded into chaos. Mark was screaming. He lunged for the AV controls at the side of the stage, his face purple with rage. "Turn it off!" he roared at the technician. "Turn that screen off right now." But the technician just shook his head, pointing to the back of the room. "It's no use, Mark," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the chaos. The room quieted slightly, the guests frozen, watching this high society execution. The feed isn't coming from inside this room. Ryan controls the system now, not you. Mark froze. He turned slowly, his eyes wild, searching the crowd until they found him. Ryan Sullivan, his chief financial officer, his ally, his white colleague who was standing calmly near the entrance with his wife Chloe. Mark pointed a shaking finger at him. You, he whispered, the betrayal dawning on his face. You did this. You're probably wondering, I said into the microphone, why your new Swiss investor would show that humiliating video of me in the alley. I looked at Mark. It was to establish your character, to show everyone in this room exactly who you are. The crowd murmured. I saw reporters in the back row scribbling furiously. But that, I said, was just the appetizer. This, I pointed to the massive screen, is the main course. The screen flickered and the alley video was replaced by a bank ledger, a complex spreadsheet showing cash flow from Washington Enterprises. Mark lied to you all tonight, I announced. He didn't secure a $100 million investment. He was desperate for a $30 million loan. Why? Because for the last 2 years, he has systematically embezzled $30 million from the company accounts. A collective, horrified gasp swept the ballroom. This was no longer just a family drama. This was a corporate crime. $30 million, I repeated, letting the number hang in the air. Where did it go? Not to building Atlanta's future. Not to new projects. The screen changed again. Now it showed a complex web of wire transfers moving from the company account to an unlisted shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. And from there to the statement of a high-stakes online casino based in Macau. It went here, I said, my voice ringing with cold fury. To pay his gambling debts. He didn't just risk his own money. He stole your money. The shareholders' money. The employees' pension fund money. Ryan! Mark finally roared, his voice cracking. He spun to face his CFO, who was still standing at the back of the room. You spineless, traitorous snake, you did this. You gave her that. Ryan Sullivan, the man I had met in the jazz bar, the man who had been trapped, began to walk. He walked slowly, deliberately down the center aisle past the stunned guests. He walked right past Mark's security guards, who were now just watching, frozen. He walked up the steps and stood right next to me. He took the other microphone from the podium. Yes, I did, Ryan said. His voice was shaking, but it was clear. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ryan Sullivan, and I am the Chief Financial Officer of Washington Enterprises. He looked at the crowd, then at Mark. And I confirm that every document on that screen is real. I am the one who authorized those transfers. I did it because Mark Washington threatened my job, my family, and my future if I didn't help him cover his crimes. I am prepared to testify to all of this in federal court. It was over. Mark knew it. He stumbled backward, collapsing into a chair on the stage. He looked at his wife, Chloe, Ryan's wife, who was now walking toward the stage to join us, her face a mask of cold, triumphant fury. But I wasn't finished. I still had one more person to deal with. I turned my gaze from the wreck of Mark Washington to the front table. To my father, David Thompson, who was frozen in his chair. My mother, Janet, had stopped crying over Tasha and was now staring at her husband, a new dawning horror on her face. But how could Mark be so confident? I asked the room, my voice filled with a terrible, sad curiosity. How could he steal so brazenly? How could he be so sure that the culture of this company would protect him, that theft and betrayal were just business as usual? I looked right at my father. Because he was just following a tradition. Because Washington Enterprises wasn't built on innovation. It was built on a lie. Weren't you, Dad? David started shaking his head, trying to stand, but his legs wouldn't obey him. My great-aunt Serafina James, I announced, my voice ringing with 40 years of stolen history. Didn't just work here. She co-founded this company. She was the genius. He was the face. And 40 years ago, when the company was finally profitable, her partner Jerome Washington decided he wanted it all. But he couldn't do it alone, I said, taking a step toward my father. He needed an inside man, an accountant, someone willing to betray his own family for a seat at the table. I pointed directly at my father. He needed David Thompson. The screen behind me changed one last time. It showed the original 1970s partnership agreement, Serafina's elegant signature right next to Jerome's. Then it showed the forged ledgers, the fake bankruptcy papers, all signed off by a young, ambitious accountant, David H. Thompson. My father, I said, my voice finally breaking with the weight of it all, helped Jerome Washington steal this company from his own wife's sister. He sold her out, left her penniless in exchange for a board seat and a life of luxury built on her stolen dreams. I reached into the small purse I was carrying and pulled out the folded confession papers I had given him weeks ago, the ones he had refused to sign. I gave him a chance, I whispered, but the microphone caught the words and broadcast them to the silent room. I offered him a way out. All he had to do was tell the truth. All he had to do was apologize. I held the unsigned paper high for the cameras and the reporters to see. He refused. He chose the lie. He chose them over me. Again. The unsigned confession hung in the air, a white flag of his guilt. My father, David Thompson, looked at the paper, then at the shocked faces of the board members at his table, then at the reporters in the back whose cameras were flashing. He saw his entire world, his reputation, his seat on the board, his carefully constructed life evaporating. He didn't say a word. He just turned and bolted. He shoved past a waiter making for a side exit, a desperate animal trying to flee the trap. But as he reached the door, 2 uniformed police officers stepped in front of him, blocking his path. These weren't Mark's private security. These were Atlanta PD, and they had been waiting patiently in the hall. Elias Thorne, who had been silent, stepped forward again, his voice ringing with the finality of a gavel. "David Thompson," he announced, his voice carrying over the microphone. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and 40 years of financial misconduct." My father froze, his face sagging in total defeat. As one officer cuffed my father, the second officer turned and walked directly onto the stage, approaching Mark, who was still slumped in his chair, utterly broken. "Mark Washington," the officer said, pulling Mark's arms behind his back. "You are under arrest for embezzlement and corporate fraud." Mark didn't fight. He didn't have anything left. The bravado, the arrogance, the charm, it had all dissolved, leaving behind the pathetic shell of a man who had gambled away his legacy. It was Tasha who broke the silence. My mother Janet had fainted, slumping over the table, but Tasha was a survivor. She scrambled to her feet and ran toward the stage, pushing past the officers. She wasn't running to me or even to her father, she was running to Mark. "Mark!" she screamed, grabbing the sleeve of his expensive suit jacket as the officer pulled him away. "Don't! You can't leave me, Mark! What about me? What about our future? What about my money?" It was the only thing she had ever truly cared about. Her reflection in his power. I looked at my sister, my ex-husband, and my father, the 3 people who had conspired to ruin me. I felt nothing but a cold, quiet pity. I stepped toward Tasha, and she recoiled, her eyes wild with hatred and panic. "Don't worry about his money, Tasha," I said, my voice just loud enough for her to hear. "He already spent it." "What are you talking about?" she whispered. "The $500,000 he wired to the Caymans last week? That wasn't just your spending money, that was everything. He emptied your joint account. He was planning to run Tasha. He was going to leave you behind just like he left me." The realization hit her. She hadn't just been his partner, she had been his last victim. She stopped screaming and just stood there, completely destroyed. I turned away from my family's wreckage and faced the room. The guests, the board members, the shareholders, the media, were all staring at me, waiting. The power vacuum was absolute. I walked back to the microphone, the emerald green silk of my dress rustling around me. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady. "I apologize for the necessary interruption." I looked at the stunned shareholders in the front rows. "As Mr. Thorne explained, I am the investor who purchased the 20% stake Mark Washington was illegally selling. Furthermore, my colleague," I gestured to Chloe, who was now standing by the stage, "Chloe Washington Sullivan, who controls her own 15%, has joined me. And as of this morning, after hearing Mr. Sullivan's evidence, we also secured the proxies for Robert Washington's 5%. I let that sink in. That gives this new coalition a 40% stake in Washington Enterprises, making us the largest and controlling voting bloc, effective immediately. I looked at my father, who was being led out the door. His head hung in shame. My first act as the new majority stakeholder is to remove David Thompson from the board of directors, effective immediately. A smattering of applause started, led by Ryan Sullivan and some of the other executives Mark had bullied. My second act, I continued, is to nominate a new chief executive officer, a leader with the intelligence, the integrity, and the Wharton MBA to actually run this company the way it was meant to be run. I turned and extended my hand to the woman who had risked everything to stand with me. I nominate Chloe Washington Sullivan as the new CEO of Washington Enterprises. Chloe stepped forward, her face a mask of poise and determination. She shook my hand firmly. The ballroom silent just moments ago erupted in applause. The real applause. The shareholders, the employees, the guests. They weren't just clapping for her. They were clapping for the end of Mark's disastrous reign. As Chloe took the microphone to calm the investors, I stepped back. I walked to the edge of the stage and watched. I watched the police lead my father past the dessert table, his legacy in ruins. I watched them lead Mark Washington, my ex-husband, out of the ballroom in handcuffs, his future gone. I saw Tasha alone, slumped in a chair, a woman who had bet on the wrong man and lost everything. I felt a hand on my arm. It was Elias Thorne. Serafina would be proud, he said quietly. I looked at him, then back at the chaos. We're just getting started, I replied. 6 months later, the glass doors of the executive suite in Atlanta no longer read Washington Enterprises. In sleek modern letters, the name now read the James Washington Foundation. It was a statement, a fusion of Serafina's name and the legacy they had tried to erase her from. I sat across from Chloe Washington Sullivan in the CEO's office. She looked like a different person. The dull resentment I had seen in her was gone, replaced by a sharp, energized confidence. The quarterly reports were spread between us, and for the first time in years they were glowing. We're up 12% adjusted for restructuring, Chloe said, tapping a spreadsheet. Rerouting the funds from Mark's Dubai projects into actual research and development seems to be working. Strange, isn't it? I smiled. You're doing exactly what this company always needed, Chloe. You're running it. She leaned back, her professional demeanor softening for a moment. We got the final reports from the legal team, she said quietly. I waited. I hadn't asked. I hadn't needed to. Mark and your father were officially sentenced last week, Chloe continued. With Ryan's testimony and the mountain of evidence you and Serafina provided, they didn't stand a chance. They lost everything. The houses, the accounts, the board seats. Mark got 7 to 10 years for embezzlement and fraud. Your father, he got 4 years for conspiracy. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I felt nothing. Not joy, not satisfaction, not even sadness. Just the quiet, hollow echo of a door finally clicking shut. And Tasha? I asked. My mother. Chloe hesitated, looking almost awkward. Your mother filed for divorce the day after your father's arrest. She's living in a small condo over in Midtown. From what I hear, the friends who used to flock to her parties don't return her calls anymore. Her entire social standing evaporated overnight. For her, I think that was a worse sentence than prison. And Tasha? I asked again. Chloe looked down at her desk. This is the difficult part. Tasha. She applied for a job. I felt my eyebrows raise. A job where? Here, Chloe said, meeting my gaze. At the foundation. We started that Fresh Start program, the re-entry initiative for nonviolent offenders and those trying to rebuild from difficult situations. She applied for an entry-level administrative position. Her application was, well, it was sincere. She seems broken, but maybe she's actually trying to change. I thought about Tasha. I thought about her cruel, mocking laughter in the alley. I thought about her screaming in the ballroom as her world collapsed. I could have crushed her. I could have told Chloe to throw the application in the trash. I could have made sure she never worked in this city again. But what would be the point? Give her the job, I said. Chloe looked surprised. Are you sure, Melissa? After everything? Yes, I said. On 3 conditions. 1, she starts at the absolute lowest position, minimum wage, no special treatment. 2, no one in that department is to know she is my sister. And 3, she has to be good at it. If she's not, you fire her. Chloe nodded slowly, a look of new understanding in her eyes. All right. I'll process the paperwork. I left Atlanta that afternoon. My work there was done. Chloe was in control. My real life was back in New York. The penthouse on Fifth Avenue no longer felt like Serafina's empty fortress. It felt like my home. But it wasn't just a home. It was a headquarters. I stood in the glass-walled office that had once been Serafina's library, looking out over the vast green expanse of Central Park. The brass plaque on my desk read, "The Serafina James Foundation." I was on a video call with a woman in Ohio, her face tear-streaked but resolute. "He emptied the joint accounts," the woman said, her voice shaking. "He left me with the mortgage and 2 kids, and he says I'll never see a dime." "Mrs. Davis," I said, my voice calm and firm. "That's called financial abuse. And you have options. My legal team is going to contact you this afternoon. We are going to freeze his personal assets, and we are going to fight for you. You are not homeless. You are just starting over." I ended the call and looked out at the park. This is what I did now. I used Serafina's $53 million to fund an army of lawyers, forensic accountants, and advocates, all of them dedicated to helping women who had been financially betrayed, women who had been ganged up on, women who had been left in the dark by the men who were supposed to protect them. I walked over to the mahogany box that still sat on the bookshelf. I opened it and read Serafina's letter one more time, her words feeling more real than ever. I could almost hear her voice, sharp and intelligent. "Don't let their cruelty define you, Melissa. Let it sharpen you. They will try to tell you that power is about destruction and control. They are wrong. Real power is about building." I thought of Chloe running the company she had always deserved. I thought of Tasha stocking copy paper in an admin pool in Atlanta with one last chance to build a life she actually earned. I thought of the woman in Ohio who wouldn't have to sleep in her car tonight. Serafina's voice in my head was clear. "Use your strength not to destroy, Melissa. Use it to rebuild." I looked out at the New York skyline, the sun catching the tops of the buildings. My mission wasn't over. It was just beginning. I hadn't just taken back a company, I had taken back my life, and I was doing it my way. 1 year later, I found myself back in Atlanta. The city skyline looked the same, but I was not the same person who had fled it. I wasn't staying at the Four Seasons. I was staying in my own apartment, a small, elegant place I kept for my visits to the Foundation's southern branch. I wasn't here for a board meeting, though. I was here for something personal. I found myself walking through my old neighborhood, the streets where I had grown up, where I had been both a privileged daughter and an outcast. I stopped in front of a familiar building. The Thompson family diner, the old faded sign used to say. The place my parents had run, the place where Tasha and I had our first jobs. The place where my father and mother had first met Mark Washington's grandfather. The sign was gone. In its place, a new beautifully painted sign read, "The Serafina James Culinary Center." I pushed open the door. The inside was unrecognizable. The old greasy booths and formica tables were gone. In their place were gleaming stainless steel kitchen stations, a bright, airy dining space, and a chalkboard menu that listed today's class's professional knife skills and community meal 5 p.m. My foundation, the Serafina James Foundation, had bought the building out of foreclosure. We had gutted it and turned it into a free culinary training center for at-risk youth and women re-entering the workforce. I walked through the space watching students in clean white chef coats learning to truss a chicken. A young man who looked no older than 19 was plating a dish with the intense focus of a seasoned chef. This was what Serafina meant by rebuilding. I moved into the small cafe at the front of the center, the part that was open to the public, and that's when I saw her. She was wiping down tables, her back to me. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no longer the perfect blonde, but a more natural brown. She wore the center's simple uniform, a black polo shirt and an apron. She was stacking coffee cups, her movements quick and efficient, but there was no spark. This was not the Tasha who had filmed me in the alley. This was someone diminished, beaten. She turned to clear the next table and she saw me. She froze. The rag she was holding fell from her hand. Her first instinct was to run. I saw her eyes dart to the kitchen, then to the exit. She looked down at her apron covered in coffee grounds, and a deep, painful blush of shame crept up her neck. She couldn't look at me. "Tasha," I said quietly. She flinched, still looking at the floor. Are you here to inspect the center? Am I doing something wrong? I cleaned this section twice." I walked closer, stopping a few feet away. "I'm just visiting, Tasha. I'm not your boss. I just came to see how the program was doing." I looked at the spotless table she had just wiped. "It looks like you're doing a good job. The place is immaculate." She finally looked up at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. The old cruel fire was gone, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. "Why?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Running the center." "No," she said, and I could see her fighting back tears. Why did you give me this job? Chloe told me you personally approved the application. After everything I did to you. After the alley. After the gala. I destroyed your life." I was silent for a moment, thinking of the woman I had been. "You tried," I corrected her gently. "You and Mark and my parents, you all tried to destroy me. You almost did." "Then why?" she pleaded, the tears finally falling. "Why help me? Why not just let me end up on the street like you?" I looked at her, my sister, the product of a family that valued wealth over worth and appearances over integrity. She was just as much a victim of their toxic legacy as I was. "Because Mark and my father already destroyed one life," I said. "They destroyed Serafina's, and then they all tried to destroy mine. But I'm still here. I'm not going to let them destroy yours too." "I don't understand," she sobbed, wiping her face with her apron. "This isn't for you, Tasha," I said, and the words were honest, not cruel. "This is for me. And for Serafina. She wanted to rebuild. She didn't want another generation of women in our family to be defined by the greed of those men. You don't have to follow their path. You can be better. This is your chance to be better." She just stared at me, her mind clearly struggling to process an act of grace in a life that had only ever been about transactions. I didn't say anything else. I simply held out my hand. Tasha looked at my outstretched hand for a long, long time. She looked at her own red and raw from cleaning. And then slowly, hesitantly, she reached out and took it. Her grip was trembling. "Good work, Tasha," I said. "Keep it up." I let go of her hand and turned to leave. I walked out of the culinary center into the bright Atlanta sunshine. I had done it. I had fulfilled Serafina's condition. I had taken control of the company, but I had also broken the cycle. I had exposed the truth. I had seen justice served to Mark and my father. And I had given my sister, my greatest tormentor, the one thing no one had ever given me, a second chance, a path to build something real. I walked down the street, no longer a victim, no longer a refugee, no longer defined by their betrayal. I was Melissa Thompson, and I was finally completely free. This story teaches us that true worth is never defined by those who underestimate you, but by your own resilience. Melissa was abandoned and dismissed as a failure, yet her greatest strength was revealed not when she inherited $53 million, but when she chose to fight back. It shows that betrayal, while devastating, can be a powerful catalyst for change. The ultimate justice isn't just about exposing the truth. It's about breaking toxic cycles and using your power to rebuild a life they never thought you deserved. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when no one else would? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories about reclaiming your power.